going to jump right into the show material, so we can switch over to the slides and let's get started. So this is the podcast art for today's show. Again, the title for today's podcast is Evil is More Powerful Than Good. And, that's kind of like a teaser title because, of course, I need to qualify this statement and explain what I actually mean by this. And, we tend to get triggered when we hear things, and we tend to want to think, we don't want to actually hear what the person is saying about it. This is part of mind control. This is part of not looking deeply enough into things, which has allowed evil to overtake our planet. Okay. What we have to do is set aside initial views of something that could be rashly judged. And, we are very quick to jump to a conclusion about what is meant just by a few words. That's because we're conditioned by the mainstream media and by Hollywood to want the very quick soundbite version or definition of things. But that's not how the real world works. That's not how real knowledge or wisdom work. Okay, we have to go deeply into something and flesh it out in all of its details. That's part of what's wrong with the modern world, is a low attention span and wanting the soundbite for everything. People say, oh, you want me to listen to a Mark Passio video? Oh, some of his videos are 6, 7, 8, 9 hours long. I don't have time for that. Well, if you don't have time for that, then you aren't interested in real learning. And you think you have everything figured out. You think nobody can bring you new information that you weren't aware of, until recently. And, then go right ahead and, feel that you have everything that you need figured out, and nobody can bring anything new to the table for your consideration. I think that's the height of ego. I think that's the height of ignorance. I think, not wanting to look into things and then prejudge them before you've actually really gone deeply into them to determine what's being said is the height of hubris and ego, personally. When I try to look into things, I try to look into things as deeply as I possibly can from as eclectic of a variety of source information as I possibly can to get a wide picture of that thing. And only then do I make a determination of what that thing actually is, because I have an accurate understanding of what's actually being said from a wide variety of people and sources. That's how real research is done. Okay, if we're being honest with ourselves, a lot of people think that they're true researchers or true discoverers of truth when all they really want is the soundbite version. They want to do something really quickly with the least amount of time and effort invested, and they think they're going to come away with an accurate understanding, and it just doesn't really work that way. So let's jump into this topic, and I'll talk more in detail about what I really mean by this statement. So, at the universal level of nature in the cosmos, okay, I would not make the statement that evil is more powerful than good. I would make the statement that at this level, at the cosmic universal level, the absolute level of nature and consciousness, that there is only the force of love and consciousness and truth and goodness, ultimately, of something that is intelligent and wants to provide ever greater consciousness and complexity and freedom and morality. Okay, that's what the whole journey of life and the whole journey of nature is really ultimately all about. So at that level, that's a non-dual level of understanding, quote, good versus evil, okay? Because there is no real polarity at that level. There is only the only thing that really is, and that is consciousness, and that is true love and true goodness, okay? So at that level, of course, good is more powerful than anything else, and love is more powerful than anything else. But that is not the level that I'm talking about here today. I am not talking about the ultimate cosmic level of consciousness when I'm saying evil is more powerful than good. I'm talking about right here in the local domain of the space-time continuum that we call planet Earth, okay? Oh, I just triggered all the flat earthers with that one, okay? But what I'm talking about is the here and now, I'm not talking about the ultimate level of creation, the ultimate level of all consciousness. I'm talking about what is taking place right here on the planet that we are all sharing together, living on, and undergoing a shared experience together upon. Okay? So we are talking about what is happening right now in the year 2019 on the earth, whatever you happen to think that realm is. Okay, what is actually happening, what is actually going on right now in the here and now in the physical world. So that being qualified, then you can see that my statement of evil is actually more powerful than good, meaning right here on earth right now. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. That's where evil is currently more powerful than good. And that is because we are living in a total control system. We are living on a slave colony for the most part. The human condition is slavery, ladies and gentlemen. We've talked about this endlessly on this show, on these series of broadcasts. And if people haven't figured that out yet, they're not paying attention. They are living in a complete state of denial and fantasy, and they are refusing to acknowledge that which is. The human condition is, in fact, slavery. We are living on what you can call a prison planet, a prison colony, a completely locked down society that in which people are not really free to exercise their sovereign natural rights. And that is a condition of slavery and duress, which is completely immoral. And that is, of course, why evil is more powerful than good. You can't possibly have that outcome. You can't possibly have that condition in any society, anywhere in the universe, unless the people of that society who comprise it in the aggregate, in the collective numbers, are ultimately giving themselves over more to the forces that underlie the manifestation of evil than underlie the manifestation of good and freedom. Okay? So if slavery is the manifested condition, there has to be an underlying reason in consciousness as to why that is the case, the causal factors. And that is what natural law helps us to discover once we understand that it is in effect, that it is in operation, and we are bound by those laws of the consequences of behavior. So once we do understand what natural law is and that it is in effect, we come to the understanding of something known as the law of freedom. And it's something that I've talked about pretty endlessly on the What on Earth is Happening series. And this is the key to all consciousness, really. This is the key to understanding what is happening here on the earth. This is the key to the answer to the question, why is the human condition slavery? Okay? The understanding of the law of freedom, which is part of natural law, gets us to the answer as to why we are in an enslaved condition here on earth and why evil is winning. Okay? So the natural law of freedom has a quantifiable effect right in the 3D domain, right in our world. We're not talking about the ultimate level of the cosmos of creation. We're talking about manifested real world 3D effects in the physical domain here on earth that can be measured, that can be observed, that when we change the conditions and then the manifestation or the result changes, we can understand that this is a science. This is a scientific effect that can be understood, observed, understood, and ultimately it can be abided by. We can understand how this law works, so then we can abide by it, we can live in harmony with it, and therefore we can actually change the manifested conditions when we change the underlying causal behaviors that lead to the manifested condition. So our aggregate freedom, meaning our freedom as a people, is directly proportional to the aggregate morality of the people that comprise that society, any given society. Consequences will be manifested into the human condition as a direct result of the moral quality of the aggregate human behavior. So as more and more people act morally, there will be one consequence. And as more and more people act in an immoral capacity, there will be a different consequence. And we have to understand that that morality is objective. It is not set or determined by man. Anybody who still believes in moral relativism is going down a satanic path. and does not understand how real morality works. And people want to judge this all the time. They want to say, oh, Passio is trying to tell people how to think and what morality is. No, I'm trying to tell you that there's a truth about morality, and it is possible to discover that truth. And it is objective, and it can be known. And just because many people are now coming to an accurate understanding of what real morality is in the actual physical domain, and how aligning our behavior to those laws of morality will actually change the resultant human condition and be able to usher in true freedom if we align our behavior to that natural morality that exists in nature. Just because more people understand that doesn't mean that they are, quote, following me, that they are somehow, being somehow controlled into the acceptance of this. That is like saying that because somebody recognizes that the law of gravitation is in effect, that the effects of gravitation are actually manifesting in the world, and then we can measure how those laws work, that somehow that means that you believe the person who did the mathematical equations to understand those working operations. It has nothing to do with belief. It is a discoverable principle in nature. That's all we have to understand about it. So people who are saying, I have followers that are accepting this, I tell people from day one, number one, don't accept this from me. Understand how it works through your own personal observation and your own personal study. And two, I'm not looking for followers, never have been. I am looking for other teachers who understand this at the level that I do, that can teach it to other people so we can get out of our folly as a species and start aligning our behavior to actual wisdom, so we can change the human condition and take it out of slavery and actually become free people, which is our birthright. Okay? And that's the only thing that will ever create true anarchy, true freedom, is the understanding of natural law. So, we change the condition through the behaviors. By changing the behavior, we change the manifested result. Okay? The underlying causal factor, I should say, is what we are looking to change. And that's changing the behavior. You can only change the behavior once you change the thoughts, because they underlie the behavior. Okay? People are going to behave as they think, as they feel, as they think that they understand something, whether they really do or not. So these laws don't care about whether you understand them or not. It's up to us to come to an accurate understanding of them. And we have to do that by using our mind, using our thoughts, and aligning that with also our heart-based intelligence of what we know deep in our heart to be true and to be right. Okay? And that's what our emotions are for. They're compasses for our direction as far as our behaviors are concerned. We need to bring that into alignment with understanding, with a logical understanding that takes place within the brain as well. So we have to develop that intelligence within the brain, but also heart-based intelligence. And there needs to be a balance between those two dynamics. Ultimately, the law of freedom is that we collectively reap as a species that which we collectively sow as a species through our behavior in the aggregate. So if you wanted to write it down as a mathematical equation, if you're of that type of a left brain persuasion to want to look at it that way, feel free to do so. I write it down like this: the sum of the freedom in any given society is directly proportional to the sum of the moral behavior of the people of that society. So a sum of freedom is directly proportional to the sum of morality, or aggregate freedom is directly proportional to aggregate morality. Okay? This is an eternally true principle in nature, an eternally true law of nature. I did not make this up. I have understood that this is how it works. That's all anyone is capable of doing with a law. Laws are not set into effect by man. Laws cannot be changed by anything that mankind does. They are immutable, unchangeable, eternal principles that exist in the inherent realm of nature. That's why it's called natural law, non-man-made. And this is the part that people refuse to accept, and that's why we're in the enslaved condition that we are in. They refuse to accept that there is any power that can put a higher law that governs behavior into effect in creation other than man. So most people are moral relativists that believe as long as you can get away with it, you can do it. That's really the case. And that's why evil is kicking our ass in the world. See, This is how people usually envision the battle between good and evil. I've shown this slide before on a former show. And they usually view it like this, like, oh, these cosmic forces at work. They're moving us around like pieces on a chessboard. You know, there's a big cosmic war going on between these higher forces in conjunction with humanity, that operate in conjunction with humanity. And like, we're kind of like their chess pieces because they're non-corporeal, and we're actually living on the chessboard, the earth, you know, and we're playing out this drama, you know, this cosmic drama of these higher forces here on the physical domain. But see, I think this is an oversimplification of the battle between good and evil. And first of all, we have to define what good and evil really are. We have to understand what they are, first of all. So I would rather look at good and evil currently as it's playing out. It's certainly nothing like this, like an evenly matched chess game. It's absolutely nothing like this. Okay, this is a poor representation of what is actually taking place on this planet, because I would much rather really look at this as the real situation. If you want to look at what is really going on between good and evil on the earth, it's this. Okay, it's a tiny little helpless baby bunny rabbit. Okay, in the rain, holding an umbrella in a collapsed state, facing like a dog that is like one of the heads of Cerberus, of hell. Okay, and there's no match. It's going to get eaten in a quarter of a bite, okay? Because it's not prepared. It doesn't know what it's up against. It doesn't know who the enemy is. It's gone into a situation that it's not ready to deal with, because it's not ready psychologically and spiritually. And it thinks it's going to take on this monster with some, you know, collapsed umbrella, you know, in a total rainstorm, completely unprepared for the enemy that it's actually up against. That's a more accurate representation, in my view, of what the real state of the conflict between good and evil as it is taking place on this planet actually is. Okay? And, you know, people will get upset with that, you know. Oh, they think, oh, so good is almost just as powerful as evil. There's this evenly matched battle. No. You're full of shit. Okay, to be honest with you, if you think that. You're lying to yourself and you're lying to other people, because you don't want to be honest about how bad the situation actually is. And that's all I want people to do. I'm not trying to say any of this to discourage anyone. See, this is about boots on the ground spirituality, this show, for people who may be new to it, okay? It's about what we are really truly up against, not lying to ourselves about that, and then seeing where we really are in that battle, how prepared we really are to fight that battle, and looking at ourselves and honestly assessing our shortcomings. See, that's the first part of any real change. The first part of any real change is you got to be able to confront your own bullshit. You got to be able to say, you know what? Here's where I'm at, and where I'm at is nowhere near ready, nowhere near powerful enough. And I have a lot of work to do on myself. That's where real spiritual change begins. That's where the real spiritual journey actually takes place. Okay? So what we have to ask ourselves is the first question in really trying to tackle this problem of good versus evil, to see where we're at within it, within this battle taking place here on earth. We have to ask the question, what actually is good? Because a lot of people have this completely ridiculous version of what good is in their mind. You know, they take the Hollywood variant of it again, you know, or the storybook variant of good, okay? Or they take just the version that their teachers have told them, that their parents have told them, that their family members have told them, that other people in society. This is called conventional wisdom. You know what conventional wisdom is? A big crock of shit. That's what conventional wisdom is, a big crock of crap. It always has been. Conventional wisdom has never proved to be right, okay? You know, it traditionally goes against everything that is actually correct and right and even moral. So if you're following what the vast majority of people think of as good, which is what conventional wisdom will tell you good is, you have no idea what real good is. You have a proxy variant of what good is that other people have served you on a plate, because that's what they want you to accept that good actually is. And good is so much more difficult to obtain than all of that. You know, they want people to believe, oh, you just, you know, go along to get along, work hard, Be, somewhat honest with other people, okay? Have kids and try to bring them up the way society tells you you should bring them up. And somehow that makes you a good person. Or people think if you're just nice, you're a good person, Niceness, and not having any rough around the edges aspect of your personality, or even being potentially confrontative with other people, doesn't necessarily mean that you are good or bad, okay? These are just things that people can't get past in somebody's personality, and their characteristic traits that they display on a day-to-day basis. It has nothing to do with whether they're actually a good person or not. So whether somebody rubs you the wrong way doesn't mean that they're bad, okay? And just because someone speaks to you in pleasant, soft tones doesn't mean that they're good, okay? Niceness doesn't translate to good and evil. Behavior does. Okay, actual behavior in what you do and what you condone being done in the world to other people, okay, or not be done to other people. That's what will ultimately make you good or evil, okay? So to understand what good really is, we need to look at the expressions of natural law. Now, this is a review of material I've covered both here on What on Earth is Happening and in whole seminars that I've done on natural law. For people who haven't seen my natural law seminar, it's my most important work. You really need to understand it. You really need to watch it in its entirety to understand what natural law is. But the expressions of natural law is what I want to talk about here to reinforce the real understanding of what good is at a fundamental level. Okay? So we have to understand we're only ever creating with two polarities or forces in nature. Okay, we are either creating with love, which is the force that expands human consciousness and helps us to really understand, to take in truth, and to then act in right action and align our behavior to natural law principles and true objective morality, and then we get a manifested result. So good and evil are actually manifestations of consciousness in the world, in our 3D domain. They are not the forces that exist truly in the natural world, but they are manifestations that happen in the natural world. Okay, the forces that are at work are love and fear. And one could even make the argument, as I do, that there is actually only one force, and that is love, but there is a forgetting or a absence or a misunderstanding of it. And that's when fear consciousness comes in. And when that happens, we could say that love is confounded, confused, it is misrepresented, or it is quote unquote absent. It really never really is absent. It is just we who are walled off from it. Like, we put up a wall around us or an eggshell around us, and then we're not able to receive that because we're creating a division or a separation that is actually an illusory one. So this is all going back to the early material of What on Earth is Happening, because there is nothing new. There's the other thing. I want to hammer on a few things. I want to hammer on that people think that what I teach is somehow cultish. Okay, I want to comment on some of that stuff that I'm hearing. And I also want to hammer on the repeated bullshit and total technique to dissuade people from looking into my work, which is obviously an obfuscation technique, that I don't present anything new. Yeah, no crap. No shit, I don't present anything new. Truth is eternal and universal. It exists at all times and places. No one can ever create any new truth. It's just what is. It's what has always been and will always be when we're talking about eternal principles like this. I can't ever create anything new within it. That's what the phrase, there's nothing new under the sun, actually means. That no one can ever teach you anything new. There is only eternal truth and principles that have always been here since creation has existed, which is eternal. Okay? And all we can do is understand them or not understand them. That's it. That's the play that is playing out here on Earth. It's a play of either love or fear. A play of either knowledge or ignorance. And when we go into that polarity, when we go into that first polarity of love, we are consciously co-creating the reality that we are experiencing. When we stay in the consciousness of fear, we are unconsciously co-creating the reality that we experience. And as I've said before, how these expressions work, okay? We start with either love or fear. Those are the generative polarities. That's what we use to create the experience or the manifested result. Then it goes into what I call the initiative or the initial expressions. And that is if we are in a consciousness that is based in love energy, okay, that is based in real truth, okay, we are going to become knowledgeable individuals. This is what enlightenment is really all about. Enlightenment is really about knowledge, folks. It's not about meditating your way into some state of, hallucinogenic awareness that would be like taking a large quantity of LSD or DMT or mushrooms, okay, or psilocybin mushrooms. Okay, we're talking about actual knowledge of how things really work. That's what enlightenment really is. It's knowledge of yourself, of what's going on within you and your consciousness and your psyche, and it's knowledge of what's taking place in the 3D domain and how the laws of nature work. That's what knowledge or consciousness really is. So I've worded it here as this is how it starts. We either take in truth or we reject truth. We accept or reject truth. This is why the human condition is the way that it is. Most people have rejected truth. See, we're in a state of judgment right now. The condition of humanity is not only slavery, it's judgment. We are in cosmic judgment. I know people will hear that as a religious term. I don't really care. Hear it however you want. You want to hear it in your mind-controlled way of thinking that means that it's religious? No. Laws of nature work a certain way. And we are judged by how we understand them or don't understand them, or how we accept them or refuse to accept them, because we're being given a consequence by the behavior that we have put forward collectively. And most people are in that consciousness of fear all day long. They refused truth a long, long time ago and are still in a complete refusal and denial state when it comes to the truth about how morality really works and how the laws of nature really work. They're soul dead. They're soul sick, ultimately. And most of them are soul dead. They're never coming back from being that soul sick. They've actually utterly annihilated the building of the soul or the transformation process of the soul, and they've put it in a grave. So really, they're not even human at some level of existence. They have cut themselves off from what it really means to be a human being. That's how soul sick and ultimately soul dead the vast majority of people are on this planet. So the initial expression is going to start the process of manifestation, because this is the beginning of whether we decide we're going to start aligning ourselves to what truth is, or whether we're going to say, F truth, I want nothing to do with it. And most people have already made their decision a long time ago. So do we become knowledgeable people, or do we remain ignorant people? And I think the answer is quite clear about what's going on with humanity right now. Then we have an expression that takes place almost wholly within us, within our psyche and our emotions, okay, and in our internal makeup as human beings. And that's either that we alleviate confusion about who and what we truly are, and we come to know the self, and we understand our own sovereignty. It's what I call here internal monarchy, meaning we ultimately are the rulers of our own thoughts, emotions, and actions. We are the ruler of the kingdom of one, the kingdom of self. That's all we can ever really hope to rule, hope to be the master of. Okay? Most people aren't even close to being the master of themselves. They know nothing about how they actually work. Okay? Or if we stay in that fear-based consciousness, which shuts all of consciousness down, makes us refuse truth, we get into a state of internal confusion, or what I call internal anarchy, meaning there is no ruler or master of the kingdom of self. No one's really at home. No one's, at home in the temple of self. And no one's taking care of that divine temple, okay, that is within each of us. We're just letting it rot. And that's where most people are at. They're in a state of total confusion about how things really work, which is spiritual illness. And then the externalized expression is what happens in all of society. So this is what happens in the 3D domain as a result of the state of consciousness that we have dwelled in, which is the causal factor. Okay? The state of consciousness is the causal factor, whether we went into love-based consciousness or energy or polarity, or whether we remained in fear. We went into a state of knowledge, of understanding of what's going on, or ignorance. And then we understand who and what we are, our internal sovereignty, our true sovereignty as beings, that we are not slaves at a true level of existence, okay? Or do we remain totally confused about the human condition and we can't even see the slavery taking place all around us? So then what manifests in the external world is either freedom or slavery. I've worded it on this slide as freedom or control, but you could easily replace the word control with the condition called slavery, which is what we are in. Total control, slavery. So that is how the manifested condition ultimately gets created. What then are we left with as a result? What is the manifestation, the result that we have ultimately created in our shared experience of life here on earth? It's either manifested good, which I call order in this slide, or manifested evil, which I call chaos, which most of us would refer to as chaos or evil. So that which is orderly, that which is harmonious, that which is in alignment with natural law, that which is in alignment with truth, with love, that is what is good. That's manifested order. And when we stay in that fear-based consciousness and we remain ignorant and we remain confused and we have accepted our bondage and slavery, then we're going to stay in a state of perpetual evil and chaos. And these polarities only work one way. It's a unidirectional flow. You cannot start creating with love consciousness, okay, with love energy, and end up in chaos. Conversely, you cannot start with fear-based consciousness and end up in a state of good, a manifested state of good or freedom or order. It's not possible. It doesn't work that way. So if you start creating with the positive expressions of natural law, the positive polarity of love, you go down this column directly in line. It's a unidirectional flow. Love leads to knowledge, which leads to an understanding of our own internal sovereignty, which leads to an external state of freedom, which is manifested good. Conversely, the negative polarity of fear will always lead to more ignorance and confusion and slavery in the world, which brings us chaos and evil. That is what chaos and evil is as a manifested condition. It can only ever work this way, okay? This is how the natural law that is actually embedded in the fabric of creation itself, set there by whatever power created all the laws of the universe. This is how these expressions actually work in our lives. And it's not what I think. It's not a belief system. This isn't a religion. This isn't a belief system. This is a science. This can be scientifically observed through a long study of history. And all you need to do is look at the effect of what was generated in any given society, and you could trace back the causal factor. It is absolutely connected causally. Okay? So people always want to say, oh, just the manifested result doesn't necessarily connect to the cause. In this case, it actually does. And a true study, a true long study of human history will absolutely prove that. And it is proven. It's just people don't want to accept it because they're in that fear-based consciousness. They don't want a higher power that ultimately binds human behavior and gives us the result based on how we behave, which is not changeable. They don't want that condition to exist. That's what wanting to be God is. That's what runaway ego is. Runaway ego is there's no higher power than me. I am the ultimate creator of my own experience. I am God. And I get to determine, and other people get to determine what right and wrong actually are, which is called moral relativism. And we're going to get to that. Let's move to the next slide and look at the relationship between human consciousness and natural law, between the aspects of consciousness and the expressions of natural law. Okay? And this is a pretty easy connection to see, especially if you're already familiar with my work. So there are the three expressions of consciousness: thoughts, emotions, and actions. These are the three ways that we ultimately express ourselves in any way in the world to anyone. Okay, so on this chart of the natural law expressions, where is the thought aspect of consciousness? Well, it's right here. It's the initial or the initiative expression of natural law. Okay, we have to process information that we take in, which is part of the trivium process, which we're also going to look at again. And we have to come into an understanding of how things actually work. That's knowledge. And we do that through the acceptance of truth. That takes place within our thoughts. Of course, our emotions are connected to that, because a lot of times the emotions that we take in, that we experience, I should say, when they're fear-based emotions, we're not going to do those thought processes correctly. We're not going to actually process the data correctly or even want to take it in at all because we're in such a state of fear. Okay? So our emotions are actually connected in with that polarity, but then they are what are taking place within us. They are the internalized expression. That's what happens inside of us. The emotions are directly leading us to an understanding of whether we are slaves in reality, and that's an actual justifiable moral condition somehow, or whether we rage against that condition and we feel within our emotional makeup that is wrong, morally unacceptable, never morally justifiable, that it is morally illegitimate, that condition. That has to be felt as much as it has to be intellectually understood. So that internal expression of natural law is directly connected with our emotional aspects of our consciousness. And then finally, what ultimately is manifesting in the external domain, what is happening in society, is a direct result of our behavior, of our actions. Okay? So that third aspect of consciousness is connected with the external expression of natural law, whether we are creating a society that is based in freedom or whether we are creating a society that is based in control and slavery. It follows so logically and naturally, but most people have not actually looked at this direct relationship. And I think it's so important, because this is what ultimately helps one to understand not only how good is created in the world, but what it means to be good. Okay? That's what we're ultimately trying to derive an understanding of. Because good is ultimate alignment. It means aligning our behaviors in every moment, or at least striving to in every moment, with an objective knowledge of what right and wrong actually are. That's what conscience is. See, conscience is the knowledge of the difference between right and wrong. And then the behavior is the exercise of conscience. See, that's what we have to do. We have to exercise conscience through our actions. We do that through our actions. Okay? We don't do that through our thoughts or through our emotions. Ultimately, our actions are what puts behavior into effect in the world and generates the externalized expression of natural law and gets us the manifested result that we are creating in the world. Our behavior does that. So that's how we exercise conscience, by knowing the difference between right and wrong. That's conscience. And then we exercise it through our actions by willfully choosing right action over wrong action. And this is how we ultimately create our reality. I've gone through this slide in a former podcast. I'll briefly go through it again. I call this Reality Manifestation 101. Knowledge or ignorance is the first step of the building block of the trivium process in our lives. It's our thoughts. Okay? We're going to go through thoughts, emotions, actions, manifested result. Okay? You're seeing a pattern here. This is how everything ultimately works. And this is why people in the dark occult don't want people to know this information. That's why they want to poo-poo all of my work. They want to tell you I'm trying to create a cult, when I'm telling people techniques of cults to help them to understand not to fall into that through mainstream media and through police and military and other government agencies. I'm telling people the techniques that cults have used upon people for thousands of years. What a great cult leader, right? He gives people all the information about how cults actually mind control people so that they can steel themselves against the cult mind control. But he's actually trying to run a cult. People don't even understand how ass-brained they sound, okay? Like I said, they have liquid diarrhea for a brain and they need a slap in the fucking mouth, except unfortunately shit splatters, That's where most people's head is at in this world, okay? That's how dumb as 10 pounds of dog shit in a 5-pound bag they are, okay? They literally are that stupid, okay? And they don't even hear, but dumb people don't even hear how dumb they are. They don't grasp that concept. That's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where most people who have a complete, absolute lack of grasp of reality actually think that they command an actual understanding of how things work. And these are the people I'm talking about, are the people who constantly say, don't listen to anything that he's saying. That's a cult leader. Okay? That's how dumb you would have to be to say that. Conversely, unfortunately, the Dunning-Kruger effect also works in the opposite way, where someone who really does have advanced capacities and the ability to understand the way things work, unfortunately will attribute other people to also have those same capacities, and that's not how it really works. A lot of people just have the capacity to understand because their brain is that fucking broken. Sadly, that's the case. That's the sad reality of the matter of the condition that a human being can be worked into. So going back to how reality actually manifests in the human condition, we first have to assemble the available information that we need to understand to process how reality works. So this is all potential forms of data that can be gathered, processed, understood, and then acted upon by individuals anywhere in any society. If we don't put that grammar, those building blocks together from the eclectic variety of sources that we have available at our disposal, we can never come to an accurate understanding of anything. And that's obviously step 2. Once we have the knowledge, we have to develop an understanding of it. We have to know what it means. We have to develop an accurate grasp of what it means. So this is how do we process that data? So these are the decision-making processes that actually happen in the human mind. Okay, the processing of the human processor called the human brain, and the other processor that's like a brain called the human heart. Now, really, we have 3. We have a third that's like a third brain, which are the guts. Okay, so the heart, mind, guts is what we have to really align. Thoughts, emotions, and actions. Brain, heart, guts. Okay, you know, we really have 3 brains. Okay, we have a brain that's about courage. The guts are our actions. We have a heart-based emotional processor that acts like a brain. And then we have, of course, the human brain, which provides the higher thought functions and the ability to think logically and reason out things. Most people aren't using any of those. Unfortunately, that's why the condition is evil is more powerful than good, because the aggregate are not using their brains or the trivium process. So if we don't come to an accurate understanding of what it means, we're going to be acting in a state of total confusion. So we have to either develop understanding or stay in confusion about what it really means, what all that information means. And then human behavior is the next step, because our behavior is based upon these 2 lower building blocks, the available information that we take in and how we process it in our mind. So each individual's behavior is based upon the quality of their decision-making processes that they performed in step 2, which in turn are based upon the quality of their available information. And I would say the completeness. I should add the quality and completeness of their available information. Okay? And then we act in the world, and that comes out through wisdom, which is right action based upon what we have come to accurately understand. We've taken in the truth. Or folly. Means we've acted in a state of confusion and in a state of ignorance, and therefore we're putting horrible quality behavior into the world and getting a horrible result in return for it. And that's the last step, the manifested reality, consequences. Freedom or slavery, what is going to actually manifest in the 3D domain? Will it be a state of freedom or will it be a state of slavery in the world? Okay, so the quality of the condition which manifests in any given society is based upon the aggregate quality of behavior within that society. That's the law of freedom. The law of freedom determines the manifested reality. That's the deterministic component of creation. That is natural law. We receive a consequence for the aggregate human behavior that we have put it forward into the world. That's why the universe works like a giant mirror. As the aggregate behavior, the quality of it is in direct alignment with morality and natural law, there will be a consequence in the 3D domain called human freedom. And as that aggregate behavior becomes more and more immoral, we will receive the consequence under natural law called slavery. That's how the law of freedom actually works. This is how reality manifests in our lives. Now let's look at the causal connection and the relationship between consciousness and the trivium and the manifested reality that we actually all share together. Well, our thoughts are that bottom block, knowledge or ignorance. Of course, we're processing those things through our thoughts. And then internal expression is the emotional aspect. Are we going to come to an understanding of what it all means, what all that knowledge means once we gather it and process it? Or are we going to remain in an internalized emotion of total confusion as to how we work and how the laws of nature work? And then, of course, our actions, wisdom or folly. We just talked about that dynamic, and that's what brings us the consequence of the result of freedom or slavery in the world. So going back to, how all of this works as a stepwise progression or process, which is the trivium. These three bottom blocks are the trivium, and then the manifested reality is how the trivium and natural law work together. Which level is the ultimate level that must be controlled or influenced to ultimately determine whether people are going to manifest good or evil in their lives? Are you going to try to control it directly from the realm of behavior? Too late. People are already acting a certain way. You have to get to it before that. Are you going to do it in the step 2, the decision-making processes? Well, some people will come maybe to an accurate understanding if they've gathered all of the grammar, the building blocks, and some will not come to an accurate understanding. So you'll be hitting 50-50 at best, maybe a little bit better, but you'll never get them all. But where you will get almost everyone is if you try to control available information. And that's what the occult is. If you hide knowledge or you dissuade people from looking into certain forms of knowledge, then you are going to control everything that follows after that in the trivium process and in the manifested result. So you will control the whole game from that level. And that is why controllers have to control the availability of information. If you're going to control whether human behavior goes in a correct or incorrect direction, okay, you want to influence that, and you want to create internalized confusion in people so they don't know what path they're on and they don't know what direction they're ultimately going in life. And it's a random crapshoot for them, okay? And you want them totally confused, and you want them thinking, hey, there is no truth. And there is no way that natural law actually works regarding behavior. There's no consequences. One set of behaviors don't lead you down one path while one set leads you down a different path. When you want people completely confused as to that dynamic, you can only control the game from the level of availability of information, nowhere else. That's the level of perception that you have to get to. You have to control perception by controlling availability of information. Or you have to control the perception of that information. That information can even be in the world and available. You need to control the perception of it by saying, oh, studying the occult is cuckoo, or natural law is a religious belief. And we don't need any more of those stupid, quaint religious beliefs in the world. We already have enough of those. That's the level that you want to control perception at. And most people fall for it. They fall for it because they don't have accurate, developed decision-making processes to come to an accurate understanding of most things. Their brain, they have not been taught how to think, and their brain is ultimately broken at a very fundamental level. It's broken when it comes to being open-minded enough to even bring the necessary information in, and then they don't know how to process it with a scientific methodology or a quantification methodology. So they don't know the trivium and quadrivium, and they're, first of all, too fearful to even gather the data because they don't want to know what the data means. They don't want to come to an understanding of it because they don't want the responsibility to act rightly upon it. That's called the condition of eternal childhood. That's where most people are at, and that's why evil is winning. That's why evil is more powerful than good on the earth. Most people want to stay in a state of total lack of personal responsibility. And they want to stay confused because then they could say, it's not my decision which way we go. I'm not really contributing to that collectively in the aggregate. Other people who know much better than myself are making those hard decisions and choices. I'm just the follower going along to get along. I'm just the child paying attention to the proxy parent calling themselves government. That's where most people are at. Little tiny babies who've never taken in the necessary information because they're too fearful. They're fearful of what cosmic adulthood really means. That's what they're fearful of. They don't want to become a cosmic adult. They want to remain forever a cosmic child devoid of personal responsibility. And guess what, folks? There is no such thing. If you are here living in the 3D domain, you are responsible for the behavior that you output. And that contributes to the aggregate behavior, which contributes to the aggregate condition. Get over it. Get used to it. Understand how it works. Get over it. You can't change that. There's no such thing as not being responsible for one's own behavior. And ultimately being responsible for either one's own understanding or confusion or own knowledge or ignorance. Okay? And that's the important part here. We are ultimately responsible for that because it can't really be truly hidden. It's not truly hidden, as a matter of fact. I talk a lot about the occult on the show, which means the hidden knowledge. Okay? But is it really hidden? No, it's not really hidden. Okay? It's out there, but people are willfully refusing it. And in this next part, I'm talking about how much easier it is for human beings to serve evil than to serve good. It's easy to turn oneself over to evil. Evil doesn't really take much in the way of to do. It's not nearly as hard to align oneself to as good is. Good is very difficult to align one's behavior to because you have to aggregate a whole lot of knowledge. You have to process that knowledge, understand what it means, understand the laws that are in operation. And there's so many blocks to that understanding. There's a bunch of jackass asshats that want to say, that's religious thought. We have to purge all religious thought. I agree. We do need to purge all religious thought. Natural law has nothing to do with religion, however. That's as ignoramus headed as saying gravity is a religion. The belief in gravitational effect is a religious belief. No, because we can't observe it in the natural world. We can't actually observe the effect in the natural world. See, this is how occult laws are discovered, through their observable effects in nature and in the manifested conditions that take place in nature in the 3D world. Therefore, it has nothing to do with a belief system or a religion. I don't know how many times I need to say that, but there will be people who insist that it's a religious belief because they just don't like the idea that there is any force that binds their behavior. That's unacceptable to them. But you got to understand, that's what Satanism is. This is why Satanists who want to be able to get away with anything that they want to do have named the ideology of Satanism, which is all just about selfishness, Satanism. They named it that because they're taking it after the archetypal figure that rebelled against the Creator in the Christian story, in the Christian mythos. Okay? They took that as the example that we want to be God. That's what the archetypal figure of Lucifer, or the fallen one, the fallen angel, that then it becomes equated with Satan in the Christian tradition. That was the mindset, that no higher power called God will bind me. No higher power within creation that is just an aspect of nature will bind me. I will do whatever I want and get away with it. Okay? That is what Satanism is, ultimately, as an ideology of a way of being in the world. It's not worshiping anything. Okay? And there are people who will insist that they know more about this religion than I did as a former priest of this religion. Okay? And then there are the other imbeciles that can't, if they had two brain cells to rub together, it would be miraculous, and if they had two brain cells, they would die of loneliness, as David Icke is fond of saying. They want to say, I was never a priest within the Church of Satan. Yeah, there's no register of Mark Passio as being a priest within the Church of Satan because I joined the Church of Satan under an assumed name, Mark Rochar, R-H-O-C-H-A-R. Look that up in the Church of Satan register, and it's still there. It'll still be there. Okay? That's the name that I joined under. And other people want to say, oh, he's not in the Church of Satan because we have no record of Mark Passio. No shit, dumb fuck. No shit. Okay? I never told anyone I joined the Church of Satan under the name Mark Passio. That's your asinine assumption. I've explained it like 10 other fucking places, first of all. Okay? I get tired of repeating myself. That's what you have to do for imbeciles. You got to say the same thing over and over and over again because they're real slow on the fucking uptake. You know what I mean? That's the problem with people. They hear what they want to hear. They don't hear what's actually being said. They have their own internalized definitions of everything, and they know fucking everything. They don't actually listen to what's being said. They just hear what they want to hear. Okay? So it's easier for human beings to serve evil. Evil's easy. It doesn't take any real work, you know? It's just like do whatever the hell you want. You know, be ignorant, be confused, act like an asshole. You know, that's what it takes to just turn yourself over to evil. It's like no work required. You know, some of the people who are evil are the laziest people in the world. Oh, they have this drive. Absolutely. They have the drive to continue to exert their will against other people and keep the condition the way that it is because they're such fearful little boys and girls, fearful little babies. Okay. But it's not like it's any real work on the self to be this way. You know, it's just like, you know, let yourself just fall apart. It's like entropy. You're just giving into entropy. You're not trying to order anything in the world or in yourself or in your life or in your internalized makeup. You're just giving yourself over to entropy, which is the natural direction that things go in the universe if left unattended and not acted upon by the will. Yeah, the entropic force is just the way the universe flows along. But guess what? There is another force that works against the force of entropy, and that's the syntropic force. syntropic, syntropic, syntropy. Okay? Syntropy is the ordering force, the force that our will acts in alignment with and orders things. When we use our will, we are aligning with the syntropic force of order in the world. Both of those forces exist. Okay? So people think, oh, there's only entropy. No, there's not. There's entropy, and then you could look at it like syntropy is the exportation of entropy. Many people look at it that way, where there is only the polarity of entropy, but then you can export the entropy to other places and order your own environment. This is like the terrain theory instead of the germ theory, you know, which is, oh, yeah, you have a fish in a bowl and the bowl's full of germs. Well, let's vaccinate the fish. There's obviously a deficiency in the fish. It can't resist all these germs. No, that's not the point. The point is it's in a filthy, dirty tank. Clean the tank. That's the terrain theory. Okay? Same thing with entropy and syntropy. Just because the tank is dirty doesn't mean entropy is the only thing that can be worked with. Okay, you can clean it, export the entropy, and then you have a syntropic energy going on within the tank, which is orderly and keeps the fish healthy. Okay, so that's what we have to understand, is that a lot of people just think they only see it unidimensionally. They don't see the actual opposite polarity at work. It's always a spectrum, and all of those seeming paradoxes can be reconciled. Okay, it's just we have to become intelligent enough to understand how those polarities operate. And then we have to be honest enough with ourselves to say, where are we? Where are we in our spiritual development? Are we truly standing in the force of love and truth? Or are we giving over to fear? And people want to say, oh, just because I get angry, oh, I'm giving over to fear. No, anger can be a very powerful force for the good when it's righteous anger and when it's channeled righteous anger. Yeah, if people go overboard with the anger, then it becomes counterproductive. But if it's channeled and it's righteous indignation, and you're saying something that is true in an angry way because it should not be that way, because people are choosing immoral behaviors to continue to perpetuate it being that way, there's nothing wrong with anger. Then it is an emotion that we are meant to feel. Okay? People have to get over this notion that you can't be vitriolic and still be standing within truth and love. Untrue. Not true. Okay? So going back to the data on this slide here, it's also infinitely easier to turn people toward the goals of evil than toward the goals of good. You know, all you need to look at is the mainstream media, the so-called educational institutions in this country, you know, government officials, you know, just general idiots who think that they know what's going on in the world and have no clue but want to speak because they like to hear their own damn voice. Okay, tons of those. It's very easy to just tell people one thing and have them believe it because they want to believe and accept something, and, you know, then turn them toward the goals of evil, okay? Or certainly at least turn them against the goals of good. Because again, those are lofty goals, the goals of good, and they're hard to achieve. That's why it's called the great work. It's not called the light, easygoing party type atmosphere. That's not what it's called. It's called the great work. Huge amounts of effort have to be put behind it. Huge amounts of willpower have to be put behind it. And that has to be done in a state of true knowledge, in an understanding of truth and morality, objective morality. So it's easier for human beings to serve evil and to be turned to the goals of evil because of the colossal ignorance of most people. This is made possible because of the colossal ignorance of most people. That therein lies the problem, ladies and gentlemen. If people weren't as ignorant as they are, and they did understand natural law, and they did understand how morality really works to bring us the consequences of our chosen behaviors through our free will, because that's the randomized component, the free will component. And then there's the determined component, which is the consequences of behavior that are ultimately brought about through natural law. That's the deterministic component of creation. So there is no just random aspect of random way the creation works, the random worldview. That's a total imbalance. And there is no determined way the creation works. There is a random component called free will, which is real and exists, and that we have, and we can choose how we are going to behave. But then there is also a deterministic component called natural law. Okay, it's not like everything is set in stone and we have no choice, but we are either aligning our behaviors to the determined law, or we are refusing to align our behaviors to the determined law. When we do one, we get one result. When we do another, we get a different result. Socrates said that there is only one good, knowledge, and there is only one evil, ignorance. I mean, going back into the ancient Greek traditions of consciousness, this was known back then. This is what good and evil ultimately are. And what is knowledge? It is the acceptance of truth. How do we accept that? Because we are in a state of love-based consciousness. And we're not talking about romantic love. We're talking about love in the agape sense. A-G-A-P-E, transliterated from the Greek. In the Greek language, it would be alpha, gamma, alpha, pi, eta is how it would be spelled in the Greek language. The word is in ancient Greek agape, and it means cosmic love, universal love, love which is the underlying force that helps consciousness to expand and express and unfold. Okay? That's the love consciousness that we're talking about, the love energy that we're talking about. We're not talking about romantic love. That would be eros love in the Greek, ancient Greek language. They called the romantic love eros. And there was a third, which was familial or brotherly, sisterly love. That was called philos, where we get the word Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. Brotherly love was philos, okay? And then romantic love was eros. But we're talking about the love in that expressions chart that we're talking about is agape love. Cosmic love, love for truth, love for what is real, okay, in nature, okay? Love of goodness and morality. That's agape love. Care for all. Care for the freedom of all. Okay? A philosopher who came shortly after Socrates, who was a student, Plato said, ignorance is the root and stem of every evil. Once again, you see the same theme reflected. What it means to be a good person is to be a person who has taken truth into themselves and become enlightened about how things really operate according to morality. Okay? What an ignorant person is, what an evil person is ultimately an ignorant one that refuses truth because they're in a state of fear-based consciousness. That's the illusory part. The absence of love is actually illusory consciousness. Okay? There really is no fear at the ultimate level. Okay? It is simply a walling off of love energy that is always around us and always surrounding us in nature. But we willfully, through our free will decisions, become fearful and stay rooted and walled off from that condition of love, of agape love. So, the ancient Egyptians, who predated the Greek philosophers, of course, they had a saying that ignorance is evil. In contemporary Western culture, we say ignorance is bliss, like it's some happiness state. Because if you remain ignorant, you're not going to get angry about how the world condition, the human condition really is. And so you could remain happy and blissful. So we say ignorance is bliss. No, ignorance is evil. That's the defining hallmark and characteristic of evil, is ignorance. Willfully choosing to ignore truth. Okay? And woe to the people that are in that state. I mean, it's a horrible karmic place to be. You will be held to account for remaining in that condition. Doesn't matter how you got there. See, you could say, oh, all the traumas of childhood, that it wasn't us who made it that way. It wasn't our responsibility that happened to us. That is something that was done to us. We can't take the responsibility for it happening. But upon really becoming a person who is capable of thinking critically, which we all should be, okay, as an adult, we should take that responsibility onto ourselves. It's our responsibility to undo that trauma that keeps us in that ignorance. It's our responsibility to work upon ourselves and do the internal work upon our emotions and upon our consciousness to take ourselves out of that condition of ignorance. Doesn't matter how ugly the truth is to look at. There are no excuses. So you look at all of the people that continue to contribute to the slavery condition, the actual people who are creating slavery, the police, the military, the actual creators of the dark new world order, the order followers themselves, the police and the military and all the other people in government, down to every last government worker, the IRS, the FDA, the CIA, all the intelligence agencies, down to ATF, who else? IRS, all of the alphabet soup agencies. Okay. Then you go to the politicians, the puppets. Okay. And then all the supporters of the system, oh, believe in us. Yeah. Go out and vote, Worshippers of the religion called government, of the God called government. Okay. All of these people, down to the followers, down to the people who even believe that this system is somehow morally legitimate. A system of masters and slaves, where some people are the lawmakers who get to, in their moral relativistic way, determine, I say that this is right and I say that this is wrong, and I will cage you for this behavior but not for this one, even if it's not harming anybody. Okay? And all the people who support that and condone it. See, it's not just the people who do it, which are largely the police and military, who actually carry out the violent behaviors upon people. It's the people who direct it and condone it. The politicians, the dark occultists, the bankers, etc. And then all the people who condone it, everybody who believes in the system of government. Every single one of them. Look, even today, these people are outrightly, I picked politicians today, they're outrightly saying that they want socialism. Outrightly saying they want government to control all of the resources necessary for human life to continue and or flourish on this planet. That they want to put that in the hands of the entity called government. Imagine. And that's what socialism is, for all the dumb fucks listening out there that don't know that that's what it is. That's exactly what it is. All authoritarianism is ultimately socialism, whether it's the left-wing faction called communism or the right-wing faction called Nazism, corporatism, fascism, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. They're all forms of socialism because you're all putting total control in the hands of the government. It's all totalitarianism. And most people are too shit for brains to have figured that fact out, because they're too politically polarized. We talked about political polarization in the first podcast back. Okay? They're so politically polarized they can't see the forest for the trees, that this is all just fucking slavery. That's all it is. And all the people who do it and condone it they're exercising participation in evil. They are participants in evil itself. And that makes them evil people. That's what it means to be evil. It's the opposite of being good. You're condoning slavery. And you're taking actions to continue a system that is rooted in slavery, duress, violence, coercion, all of those things that are all ultimately immoral and ultimately generate evil in the world. down to the very voter, down to the very person who just says, I think politics, I think government should continue at all. That I think it's somehow morally legitimate. You are participants in evil, and that makes you evil yourself. That's what a bad person is. That's one of the things that makes someone a bad person. They can be a bad person by many other behaviors, but that is one of the defining things that makes people a bad person. If you believe in the legitimacy of any form of government, you are a bad person by definition. By definition, you cannot be a good person if you believe that the coercion, duress, violence, and slavery called government should or must continue. Just believing that that is the case makes you a bad person, first of all. Okay? Now, just thinking that that shouldn't exist doesn't necessarily make you a good person. You still have to understand that objective morality exists and align your behavior to it by understanding which actions are right and which actions are wrong, which we're going to get to. So, is all of this that we've been talking about up to this point so far, this understanding of what truth really is, what right and wrong really are, is all of this knowledge really occult? Is it really hidden from people truly? I've put this slide in some of my other presentations, but I think it really warrants going over again here. Are we as a people, as human society in the aggregate, are we really ignorant people, or are we just merely nescient people? The difference between nescience and ignorance, a very important factor to understand. I call this the context of not knowing, because both of these terms, nescience and ignorance, again, there you see the term nescience, not an everyday word, but you can see it means no science, the absence of science, ne-science, okay? So they both mean, nescience and ignorance both mean not knowing, to not know. But there's a context for each one of them. How do we not know? Okay? Nescience comes from the Latin verb nesciere. Okay? That's in turn derived, that's the prefix ne, ne in Latin. And then you're using the verb sciere in Latin, which means to know. So nesciere means to not know, or to be ignorant of. But there's a connotation to using the verb nesciere in Latin. It means that you don't know, but you didn't know because the knowledge is not present in your environment. You cannot possibly know it because you cannot possibly gather the information to come to an understanding of it. So the information is just not present in the environment anywhere. It is unobtainable. Ignorance, on the other hand, in the Latin language comes from the Latin verb ignorare, and that means to not know even though necessary information is present, because that information has been willfully refused or disregarded. Here we come back to the theme again. Willful refusal of truth. We're not talking about no fault of one's own because you couldn't possibly have known. It wasn't possibly available unto you. No, we're talking about the information is available unto you, and you just say, I want nothing to do with that because I don't want the responsibility that goes along with knowing. Okay? That's ignorance. Just like when someone's in a room, you're ignoring their presence. You're not nescient of their presence. It's not like you don't know that they're there. If you want to willfully ignore somebody, you know they're there and you just don't engage them deliberately. Well, if we look at the human condition, is the human condition nescient or ignorance? Well, do we have tons and tons and tons of information about every possible topic available and information about the human condition available unto us at a fingertips notice? Of course we do. No, this is the human condition right here. We don't want anything to do with it. We don't want to hear it. We want to shun people who are saying it to us. We want to say, oh, it matters how you say it to us. You have to have our delicate emotional sensibilities in mind because we're such frail, fragile people that can't be upset, can't be in any way, have our emotions balance upset. We can't be offended, So we're just going to, cover our ears and just look the other way and ignore your presence and ignore what you're saying, the information that you're bringing to the table, And then you have the help of the mainstream media and the big tech gurus that want to censor people now and take their voice off the table so that they can't be heard. And that's a dangerous game to play. I mean, the next step after that is hot physical war. I keep telling people that you want to play that game, you want to play silly games, you're going to win silly prizes. And trust me, when that eventuality happens, don't say people weren't warned, because it's only going to be tolerated for so long, and then it's going to go off after that. And it's going to be a very bad condition, especially for the people who are unprepared physically and emotionally and spiritually for it. You know, some of us will be in better shape than others. I'm telling you, folks, if you're not preparing for that eventuality and you're putting all the eggs in the basket of good, I don't know if I would have that kind of confidence. I think it would be a poor choice, personally. I think we should continue to work toward the goal of helping people to understand in consciousness so we don't go down that path. That's what all my work has been about, trying to warn people we're heading down a very dark fucking path. And it's going to lead to a lot of bloodshed, and that's not fear-mongering. That's called looking at a long view of history and understanding the patterns. And telling you, it's not going to end well. It's not for anybody. For the people who are on the side of good or the people who have aligned themselves with the forces of evil. It's not going to end well for either side, which is why I'm trying to avert that eventuality, with which we're racing toward headlong because of things like censorship and willfully ignoring truth. We're not a Nescian society. We're an ignorant one, an ignorant society. That's what we are. Okay? So what actually is a truly good person? Not see the variant, again, that they give you in storybooks, little kids' books, or Hollywood movies. Say, oh, he just tried so hard to be good and to like his family and be a likable person. That's not what it means to be good, folks. Goodness really means that you are enlightened when it comes to the objective knowledge between right and wrong behavior. You know what a right is and why it's okay to perform it, and you know what a wrong is and why it's not okay to perform it. That's what a truly good person is. And in every moment, they strive in every way in their lives to choose the right action over the wrong action willfully from a position of objective knowledge. That's what it means to be enlightened. So if you think that you can accidentally stumble into that without actually truly taking that knowledge into yourself through conscience, it's an impossibility. You know, you're wishing for something that never will be. It's fantasy world. Again, part of my work, big part of my work, is the distinction between the actual reality in nature and the constructual reality that is artificially created in the mind. And most of the time, never the twain shall meet, you know? We have to understand that most of the time, the constructs that human beings have come up with are not in keeping with nature and reality at all. This is how far off the path of truth and goodness we really are as a species. Again, conventional wisdom is rarely correct and it's rarely moral. So what does it really mean to be a good person? We have to explore that question. It means to align our behavior to right and willfully choose right over wrong. Right is that which is correct and based in truth, and that which is moral, because actions which are in harmony with natural law because they do not initiate harm to other sentient beings, whereas immoral behaviors are actions which are in opposition to natural law because they do initiate harm to other sentient beings. This is what the dynamic is all about, whether something is moral or right, or immoral or wrong. Does the behavior initiate harm to other sentient beings? And if it does, then it's wrong, and you shouldn't engage it. And if it does not initiate harm to other sentient beings, then that is reserved as a human right. It really is that simple. Most people can't give you that simple definition. And that's why all the people who engage in anything to do with government are immoral, bad, evil people. They have aligned themselves with the forces that are going to create and manifest evil and chaos in the world. Okay, because they don't understand the actual objective difference between right behavior and wrong behavior. Being a truly good person is entirely about correctly understanding and living in accordance with objective morality, with the laws of objective morality, natural law. That's the key to everything. That's the golden key that unlocks all the locks on all the doors, on all the cages in the extant universe. When we understand these principles, we won't be locked up in a prison, a planet any longer. Okay, we will manifest a condition of actual true human freedom and anarchy on the earth, which means a state where there are no masters and no slaves. That's all the word anarchy is and ever has meant. Does mean now and ever has meant and ever will mean. But why aren't we at a state of true freedom? Why aren't we at an understanding of objective morality and aligning our behavior to it? And therefore, why are more people bad people than there are good people? Infinitely more. Overwhelmingly more people are bad people than good people in our world, on the earth. And it's because one of the primary factors is most people on earth are moral relativists. And I've said this before to people. I told people this when I spoke down in Anarchapulco. I've conducted social experiments over the years where I have asked people whether right and wrong are something that human beings get to make up for themselves, or whether they are objective principles that exist in the natural domain. And overwhelmingly, all the time, whenever and wherever I do this social experiment, the numbers come back the same. 2/3 of people, 2 out of every 3 people in the world, are moral relativists. They believe that human beings can decide what right and wrong are for themselves subjectively, but they do not believe that there is an actual objective standard of right and wrong that exists inherently in nature. That's called moral relativism. It is the ideology or the religion, I would call it a religion, more so than even an ideology, that objective morality does not exist inherently to nature, and that right and wrong are subjective constructs which human beings may invent and arbitrate according to time, location, circumstance, or preference. That's what the belief or the religion called moral relativism actually is. Okay? Objective morality doesn't exist. There's only subjective whims and preferences, and human beings can arbitrate what right and wrong are at different times, places, locations, circumstances, etc., according to their whims, their likes, their preferences. That's what moral relativism is. Now, in contrast to that, and in truth and in reality, not in the constructural domain of erroneous human thought and religious belief, but in the actual natural domain of the real world, the real physical 3D reality based in nature in which we all live. Okay? Morality is actually objective. It is objective, meaning it is independent of human perception. Rights exist inherently within nature, and rights can never become wrongs, and wrongs can never become rights at any place or time, regardless of how many people believe or wish for it to be so. That's impossible. You cannot turn a right behavior into a wrong behavior and a wrong behavior into a right behavior just by saying it, believing it, wishing it, writing it down in some magical ritual called government, signing into law. All of that is utterly irrelevant. Right behavior is right behavior, wrong behavior is wrong behavior, and it is dependent upon whether harm is initiated to another sentient being when the action is performed. That's it. That is the determining characteristic of right and wrong. Rights do not initiate harm to other sentient beings. Wrong behaviors do initiate harm to other sentient beings. And one can never become the other. Moral relativism is the ultimate destroyer of all freedom in the human domain. You can never achieve a state of freedom in moral relativism. You want to know why? Moral relativism is rooted in the polarity of fear. That's the number one reason. And you can't ever create any freedom with that polarity, and you can't ever create any good with that polarity. Any society of human beings that believes that there is no natural objective difference between right behavior and wrong behavior, and believe that human beings may arbitrarily create or decide what right and wrong are for themselves, is a society that can never truly bring their own behavior into alignment with natural law. And since the governing dynamics of human freedom are predicated upon the aggregate morality of a society, it is a total and permanent impossibility for true freedom or anarchy to ever exist in a society that embraces moral relativism. Only moral objectivists can ever create a society based in true anarchy. And I'm talking about real anarchy, cooperative spiritual anarchy, not the chaotic form of anarchy, which can happen. Okay, you can have a society in which there are no rulers and everybody's still trying to kill each other. Okay, and doing violence unto each other. They don't just think that they can rule somebody else, but they think that they can go and do all other kinds of immoral behaviors to people just because they can. Okay, that's a morally relativistic society. Only a true anarchic society is only ever based in moral objective behavior. That's it. It cannot exist in any other state. And people don't understand that. Anarchists, people who claim to be anarchists, do not understand that. And then they take umbrage with me telling them, you're not really a real anarchist. You're one of those chaos anarchists, that gives a reason for the mainstream media to tell people that anarchy is equivalent to chaos. Because what you would probably create left to your own devices, yeah, you might not have a world that has government in it, but you'd have a world full of assholes, of completely spiritually devoid assholes that have no idea of what real spirituality is. Because you don't believe spirituality even exists. You don't believe consciousness even really exists because you're trapped in a completely fucking bogus, out of date, provably false and proven false over a century ago paradigm of science based in Newtonian materialism that is 100% factually proven incorrect by scientific methodology in the modern world, which you are not privy to the new science. And you believe that the new science actually constitutes some crazy fucking religious belief in your mind, when in fact you have the crazy fucking religious belief that you believe in Newtonian materialism in a year that is 100 years past where it's been proven incorrect scientifically. And you're just not privy to that science. This is how far back your alleged knowledge of science is rooted. It's rooted over 100 years in the past, and you're taking 100-year-old Newtonian paradigm-based science and bringing it into the... I'm sorry, I accidentally clicked my slide forward. I'm going back. And you are bringing that ancient, outdated, so-called scientific, quote, understanding into the modern world in the present year and trying to say it still holds true just because, quote, scientists believe that it was true back then, erroneously, because they didn't have the knowledge that they do today. They didn't have the framework for understanding the incorrectness of that proposed paradigm. Now they do, as do many others. And it's proven to be false. So, moving on to the next slide. Why do people continue to create things that they say they don't want to experience? Again, these fake anarchists are a perfect example. Okay, I'm going to continue to hammer on them, and they already don't like me, so let's go full bore on them. Okay, first of all, they're non-scientific individuals that have a religious belief system because, again, they're clinging to a dead paradigm of science that now can only constitute religious belief. So they're not scientifically minded individuals at all because they're not using the scientific method or the trivium and quadrivium processes to understand reality. They just accept an outdated notion because they're more comfortable in their fear-based consciousness of accepting that than actually looking at modern science and what it is telling us about the nature of reality. Okay? I'm the most skeptical person there is. I come from a total scientific background in engineering. It's about the most real-world, physical, dynamic-based science that there is, okay, of physical dynamics. Okay, so I have a very skeptical scientific background, but because I've kept up with modern advancements in the understanding in the scientific community, I understand what we know about consciousness and about epigenetics and about new biology, etc. Okay? So, I'm sorry. I'm going to just ask my producer for a moment if you could please see if this window is closed, because the outside noise is really deeply interfering with my thought process with the kids that are screaming out there. Again, folks, it's a very constrictive environment in here. I'm doing this show in a little makeshift studio out of a bedroom. We did open up a window earlier to let some air into the room because it was very stuffy, and I'm trying to get this window closed because there are very loud children screaming outside, and it's been very difficult for me to follow my own internal thought process, and I apologize for that. I'm usually very sharp and on point, but it's been so loud out there from what I can hear that it's very distracting to me, so I apologize that. I'm being told that it is not coming through over the air, but it is certainly loud enough in the room to very much distract me. So again, I apologize, and I'll try to refocus. So, why do are people constantly saying and paying lip service to want this particular condition? Freedom, anarchy, whatever you want to call it, okay? A state where we are free to exercise our rights unrestricted. But yet their behaviors contradict that. This is cognitive dissonance. This is the state of dreaming, which is the proscription against which it is given in the occult mystery traditions, to stop dreaming. Stop pretending that the world is some other way. Stop aligning your behavior with things that don't serve who you are and your stated goals. Okay? So we are constantly, as a human species, in this torn apart state where our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions are not internally aligned within ourselves. So we're a kingdom divided within ourselves. Okay? So we think, feel, and say one thing, and yet our actions, our behaviors betray those thoughts, feelings, and words. Okay? And what we're doing is actually bringing about the exact opposite result, the exact opposite consequence or manifested condition. This is cognitive dissonance, or what I have called on this particular slide, internal contradiction within the self. If we exist in that internal contradiction and we don't unify our thoughts, emotions, and actions, we are always going to be in a state of vulnerability and weakness. And we're going to be internally contradicted such that we can never truly unify anybody, any group externally to bring about like collective behavior. I'm not talking about like a group as far as organizations, like institutional organizations are concerned. I'm talking about just cooperative efforts between a group of individuals. We're not even going to unify that. We're not going to unify ourselves internally as single individuals. We're scattered. We're in the state of schism, as you see on this slide. That's a perfect example of what the whole concept of internal schism is about. You know, these three aspects of consciousness fighting each other, you know, or being ripped apart, going in different directions. We have to unify all of these. So there's constant lip service to things that we say we want. We say we want freedom. We say we want our rights. We say we want our sovereignty. We say we want anarchy. Okay? But just because people say they want these things and they say they know what it is to be good doesn't mean that they're going to get them. And it doesn't mean that they're actually really good people. You could say all sorts of things. People say they're Christians all the time and they're fake-ass Christians. People say that they're Freemasons and they don't understand the first goddamn thing about the tradition of Freemasonry. There's all kinds of in-name only people. You know, you hear the term rhino in the political world, Republican in name only, but really they're socialists underneath, you know, pretending to be that. Well, there's all kinds of people who pretend, put on a mask and pretend to be one thing when actually they're doing the exact opposite. Because we have to stop looking at what people say and look at their actions. And this is what it means to really be a good person. To be a good person means you're aligning your actions to what is right. You're not just saying that you want to do it. Actions prove who someone is. Words just prove who they want to be. You could say all kinds of things about what you want to do, who you want to be, you know, what you say you want to manifest in the world. And if your actions are betraying that, who gives a shit what you said? It makes no fucking difference whatsoever at all. And this is what we have to understand. Paying lip service to something doesn't mean you're getting it done. It doesn't mean you're acting in accord with bringing it about into real world manifestation. You're just saying that you want it. You know, This isn't about saying that you want something. It's about actually changing yourself. The old, meme with the politicians thing. They're saying, who wants change? And everybody raises their hand. But who wants to change? And then everybody's hand goes down and their heads go down and the flies are buzzing about their head. Most people pay endless lip service to what they say they want and to what they think being good means, but they don't act upon it to make it actually happen in the real world. This is what I'm trying to say makes all the difference. Intention, who cares? It's what we do that matters. Tons and tons of people saying that they're good people, saying that they want to be free. Couldn't spell the word freedom, let alone know what it really means. That's how ignorant they are. Ignorant hordes. Dumb, ignorant bags of crap that haven't learned a damn thing in their whole lives. Oh yeah, I'm a little angry about it, folks. You want to know why? You want to know why there's righteous anger and indignation there? Because these people are your enslavers. Their ignorance is our collective enslavement. Get over it. That's who's really enslaving us. The collective ignorance of humanity is enslaving us. Could a handful of occultists enslave anybody? They're like old crackly boned old farts men, most of them. Okay? They're an old fart that if they bended their back too far, you'd hear them crack like some peanut brittle. Okay? How are they going to control 7.5 billion human lives? Like you'd throw a punch at them and you might not even connect. You might miss by like an inch and they'd like explode into dust. I mean, that is literally how fragile some of these people are physically. Okay? And we think they're going to control the human masses? They couldn't fight through wet tissue paper in a gift box. But the fact of the matter is that these are the people who are enslaving us through their ignorance. Most human beings are not good people because of their ignorance. The world could not possibly be in the manifested condition of slavery if the above statement was not true. Regardless of their intentions, more people are either moral relativists or have not resolved the internal contradictions which hold back their actions from alignment with true goodness. And it's partially that way because they are not capable of doing it because they're so ignorant. And again, then people will make excuses for them, right? They'll make excuses for why people are as ignorant as they are. I hear this all the time by people in the community. Oh, they're so ignorant because of this or that, or this trauma happened to them, or they didn't have time to look into this or that, or they have a job or they have kids. It doesn't matter. All endless excuses and justifications for why people remain in a state of total ignorance. And in that state of ignorance, they are not aligning their behavior with what is right, and they're condoning what is wrong. And in doing so, that is what is creating the manifested collective human condition of slavery. And it's wrong. And that's what makes someone a bad person. They're remaining ignorant. It doesn't matter whether you believe that or not. It doesn't matter whether you think there's any kind of a legitimate excuse or not, because there isn't. There is no legitimate excuse for why people remain in that condition when the truth is all around them. It's just an excuse. That's all it is. And people who make excuses are bad people as well. Because intention is meaningless, folks. It doesn't matter what you say you want to do. You could set a billion intentions. This is what New Year's resolutions are all about, right? We set all these intentions for what we say we want to accomplish. But how many people actually do what they say they're going to do? Action is everything. You are what you do, not what you say you will do. Words may show a man's wit, but his actions show his meaning. Benjamin Franklin. It is not intentions that matter. It is actions that matter. We are what we do and say, not what we intend to do. We need to throw this idea of intention away. I never liked it. I never liked it in spiritual circles. I always thought it was pseudo-spirituality. And everybody comes to the defense of intent. Everybody's waving the big banner, the battlefield flag of intent. Intent is what matters. You're full of shit is what you are. You're lying to yourself. Lying to yourself because you like how pretty it sounds. And you want to hear the little floaty, flowery definitions. That's what you want to hear. That's all you want to hear is the flowery definition of something. You know? You don't want to hear what it really is. You know? Because that is hard to hear in people's minds. You know? Because it's brutal honesty. Is that intention is meaningless. That's brutal honesty. That means you can say anything. You could say anything, man. Anything you want to say. You can say it. That doesn't mean that you're actually going to align your behavior to that and actually do it and carry it out and make it happen in the manifested world. Saying something, anybody can say anything. You could bullshit anything with anybody. We have to gauge people by their behavior, by what they actually do in the real world, on the ground. Boots on the ground spirituality. I've said it a million times and I'll say it a million more. This is about our actions. We will be judged according to our actions. And that's why humanity is being judged. We are in the condition of cosmic planetary judgment. That's right now, that's where we're at. That's what the post-apocalyptic world is all about. The apocalypse happened. That was the reveal of knowledge. It's done and over with. And you know what humanity said? Fuck truth. I want no part of you. That's what it said to truth. And now what follows that is cosmic, planetary, species-wide judgment by creation through natural law. We are going to be judged by the consequences that we receive in the physical manifested world that we now must live in as a result of what we have collectively co-created. So I don't want to hear about how powerful intention is. Intention is only powerful if you follow it up with action, boys and girls. That's when intention becomes powerful. You can set an intention. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But if you just set an intention and let your lips flap away, you know, well, who gives a crap? What good is that? You know, you just flap on and on and on, you know, and feel the breeze of the gums flapping. You know, that's all intention without action is. When you set an intention and then you follow it up with right action that brings about that good intention into manifestation, then you're on your way to becoming a good person. But what do we have from people? More and more excuses. Excuses, excuses, and more excuses. Ad infinitum, endlessly. Endlessly. Excuses are for people who don't want it bad enough. Stop saying, I can't, I won't, I might, I'll try, maybe later, tomorrow. Start saying, I will, and do it today. Or at least set the process in motion through your action today. You could do a little bit and then build on it tomorrow. You don't have to get it all done at once. This is why people never start. You know, they try to look at the whole big picture and they want to do it all at once. You know, things are done in stepwise progressions. That doesn't mean we haven't had enough time to start, folks. We have more than enough time. We've had more than enough time to get on the path of true spirituality and a true understanding of what's going on. More than enough time. Stop making excuses and start making changes. Excuses are the tools of incompetence used to build monuments of nothingness. You know, that's all we'll ever become is incompetent people living out in a state of surrender and hopelessness and quiet desperation, putting their hands out going, oh, woe is me, what could I do? You know, when in fact the truth is that we're incredibly powerful beings as individuals, and if we only step into that power through our right behavior, we will understand what our true power in the world is to affect change in our own lives and in the lives of others for the positive. So another aspect of what makes someone evil is complicity in evil through their silence. Most people who know, I can't tell you how many people I know who know what's going on and they're just totally silent about it. And they're giving all these excuses. Oh, I might start talking about it publicly. I might start talking about it with my family and friends. I might start doing a blog. I might start a YouTube channel and talk about all these things. I might in the future. Excuse. You know? And then when you ask them, why aren't you actively doing it now? There's a million excuses. Oh, I'd have to take the time to do this. And yeah, it takes time. What do you think, these slides build themselves? What do you think, I'm not sitting here for multiple hours every week building all this material, thinking about what I want to say, putting appropriate visuals to it? No, just the slideshow fairies come and visit Mark in Philly. And they build his slides for him. They build all of his slideshows for him. But they're such good creatures, the slideshow fairies. I mean, you know, the presentation fairies, that's their close cousins. Whew, man, do they do a lot of great work. I'm telling you. It's like I just have to kick my feet up on my desk and practically do nothing. You know, kick back with a drink, kick the feet up, and the slideshow fairies got this. You know? And that's how people think things get actually done. Yeah, it's time. It's sacrifice of your time. It's putting your attention on something enough to understand it in its completeness and then put it out there in a way that it can be understood. Most people are just sitting there silencing themselves, censoring themselves because they're too worried about what other people are going to say about them if they come forward. And they're also too worried about, oh, what am I going to lose in my life that I currently am doing? What am I not going to have time for anymore? Because there's going to be a further constraint on my time that I'll have to manage. And I'm not going to lie to you, that's exactly what it is. There are things I want to do each week that I have to forego doing to do this work. And that's just how it is, because there's only so much time in a week. By passively accepting evil and remaining silent, we are participating in the evil. Those who through their silence allow evil to be done unchallenged are just as immoral as those who are doing it. And I wholeheartedly concur, and truer words were never spoken. When freedom is at stake, your silence is not golden, it's yellow. Because you're a damn coward. That's what it really means to not have started speaking up on this condition of slavery. Imagine slaves not saying that slavery is immoral. And they themselves are being held in that condition of duress and slavery. Imagine. And they're saying nothing about it because they're too worried about what the other slaves might think of them, who are okay with their condition of slavery. You know, you go back to the writings of Frederick Douglass. You should read his autobiography. You know, I think it's called something like The Life of a Slave in Early America or something to that effect. If you just type in autobiography of Frederick Douglass, you will come across it. I think you could download it on archive.org, if I'm not mistaken. I think has a copy of it for free. But if you read that autobiography, you know, he was not only, you know, had to wrestle to come to an understanding of what slavery was in his own mind, because, you know, they just brought you up in it. You know, you were just brought up in it generationally. You know, most people didn't even hear the term slavery and understand what it meant. You know, it was just, this is what you did. This was your life, you know, and the master told you what to do and you did it, or you were beaten furiously by other slaves, the house slaves. And that's just what life was, you know. And when Frederick Douglass escaped his bondage in the southern states and eventually went to the northern states and had some subsequent, even before he did that, when he had conversations with other people who were being held as slaves in the American plantations in the southern colony, in the American forced labor camps. We shouldn't call them plantations. They were forced labor camps in the southern colonies. He was trying to explain to them what slavery was and how this was an immoral condition for anybody to be held in. And they were saying that he was a bad person and he was immoral for refusing to go along with the wishes of the master. And if he were to escape, he would be stealing the master's possessions, stealing the master's property by running away, because he would be stealing himself, because they saw him as the rightful possession of the master. Can you believe that that is how many of the black slaves that were held in the condition of slavery and duress that they were during the colonial period and after that into early America up to the Civil War era saw themselves. That's how brainwashed. That's how much of a job in brainwashing them from birth. The abhorrent people who did these abhorrent practices, the kind of brainwashing they conducted upon them from the time that they were babies. Okay? And this is the problem, is that other slaves are saying to people, don't speak out. You sound crazy, or you're wrong, and this is just a fine, perfect way to live, And other people are worried about what they have to say. They're worried about what other slaves. That's like Frederick Douglass saying, well, I better go put myself back on the plantation in the forced labor camp because some other slaves told me I was a bad person because I was speaking out against the master and stealing his property by running away. I mean, imagine this. But that's what the house slaves of today talk like. People who actually think that there's legitimacy to the whole government slavery system. And they're shaming other people for talking out against it. I don't really care what you say about me. I'm not fooled by you, or do I worry about what you think of me? And this is the problem, this is why most people are silent, because they're too cowardly and they're worried about what other people think of them. We also go through complicity and evil through inaction. So look, we have complicity and evil through ignorance, okay? Complicity and evil through silence, which is not displaying our emotions and righteous indignation. That's apathy. We're going to even get to that in a moment. But then complicity and evil through inaction, through cowardice of not wanting to do anything. The worshipers of the state enforcers, the police, the military, pacifists, defeatists, nihilists who don't care about anything, most traditional religionists and most New Age religionists, left-brain eggheads, the ultra-skeptic, the ultra-quote scientific, but they're actually scientismic, okay? It looks like our slideshow is paused here. We're going to try to work that technically out if we can. Let's see if we could get back to it because it's not advancing to the next slide. There we go. Okay. So complicity and evil through cowardice. State worshipers, state enforcer, thugs, pacifists, defeatists, nihilists, traditional religionists, and New Agers, left-brain eggheads, who they're just scientism worshipers. They all have one thing in common, all of these people. They would never lift a finger to defend true freedom because they are all ultimately cowards without the slightest bit of true courage. These people who want to never take real world action and only talk and talk and talk and talk or just go along to get along because they don't want to rock the boat, nothing but cowards. Never have been anything but cowards, never will be anything but cowards. That's all they are. That's all they ever have been. And that type of inaction is not going to get you any real world change. It's certainly not going to create a free society, And again, these people are worried about what other people will think of them, or they're so locked into their religious belief, whether it be traditional religion, New Age religion, the religion of government, the religion of science, which I call scientism. It's not real science. It's a rigid belief in what the current wizards or sorcerers of science say that you must believe. And again, the other way that we become bad people is we destroy care. So we destroy the three destroyers of being a good person is ignorance, apathy, and cowardice, and inaction. Cowardice and laziness. You can combine those and just call it inaction. Ignorance, apathy, inaction. Okay? So when we abandon the generative principle of true care, heart-based intelligence, what we care enough to put our will and actions behind is what ultimately gets created in our world. It can never be any other way. This is the generative principle of creation. The world is the way that it is because most people do not care enough, even if they say they want things to be different, to change it through their actions. This was a slide I put into my natural law presentation, the generative principle, the eighth principle, the principle of true care. Heart-based intelligence and action born of the heart, born of our emotions, of our emotional intelligence. So we can say anything. We could pay lip service to a million different things, but unless we care enough to put our behavior into effect, our will, to engage our will and put the behavior into effect in a 3D world, what we say we want is not going to manifest in the real world. That's how it works. Care has to underlie will. So most people, think about it. How many people are actively engaged in the great work? How many real teachers of objective morality do we have? How many teachers of natural law? How many people who are trying to teach people that government is immoral and that it's slavery? You know, compared to how many people just go along with it or just pay attention to frivolous stuff or only care about themselves, which is what Satanism is ultimately about, and try to live a life of hedonism and or nihilism. Think about the collective number all over the world of people who you would truly consider are doing the great work to end the slavery called government on the earth, and to truly help people to understand what real morality is. Think about how many people are really actively and effectively doing that type of work on the entire planet. And percentage-wise, try to visualize what that percentage is. And I naively thought when I started this work that there would be millions of people at my level of teaching by this point. Naively and just absolutely, completely erroneously, I believe that. Okay? And when you look at the number, it is like a thousandth of a percent. And I think if it's that, we'd be doing well, you know? It is horrifyingly paltry, the number. Now, I know we're moving into the last hour of the show. I'm going to wrap up the presentation. We will be getting to your calls in this hour. So everybody waiting on Discord, just be a little bit patient. I'm just going to wrap up the points in these last few slides. The true great work is the arduous task of influencing others to awaken to the truth. It is to help them to realize that in supporting and condoning the legitimacy of authority and government, that they have actually been supporting and condoning the legitimacy of slavery, and that they were immoral for having done so. How many individuals have actually stepped into the responsibility of this great work and are doing it effectively? That is the question we need to ask ourselves to really understand how many truly good people are out there in the world. That they are so in the dynamic of good that they have felt that they must make it their mission to help to enlighten others. No one can enlighten others for them. We can show them the information that will help them to enlighten themselves if they take it into themselves and don't refuse that truth. That's what the great work is to do. Most people need to be dragged in, kicking and screaming into that uncharted territory of truth and freedom. Okay? But the people who care enough about service to truth that actually are doing that great work are few and far between and scattered to the four winds of the earth. And that is why evil is kicking our ass. That is why evil is a more powerful force on this planet than is good. And I think that wraps it up, folks. I said my piece. I said what I wanted to say on this dynamic. Okay? You have to understand that we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to start from where we are at and not lie to ourselves. That's the first step of occult initiation. Stop lying to yourself above everyone else. Because if you don't tell the truth to yourself, you can't tell the truth to anyone else. So you have to start being honest with yourself. Where are we? What are the real dynamics taking place? How many people are really actively engaged in this spiritual battle? Final thing I want to say about this, folks, is all the infighting that's going on between everybody of every different possible faction and persuasion, personally and group dynamics, everywhere. On social media, in the real world, everywhere. I see it all over the place. I try not to get involved in this stupid fucking drama, because that's all it is. Stupid fucking childish drama. I don't want that dragging me down into that morass of selfishness and childishness. Nobody's going to take me off the focus of my work. You see what the focus of my work is. You see what the intent of it is, and then I back it up with action by putting it out there into the real world and explaining it to people and doing the great work of teaching. I'm not going to stop doing that. That's my personal responsibility, and I'll continue to do it. Okay? So as for all the infighting, you know what it really means? I'm going to sum it all up and tell people what it really means. And it can only mean one thing. It can only mean you do not deeply, personally, and viscerally within your own life experience truly know the enemy that we are up against. Because if you did, you wouldn't be infighting with anybody. You'd be putting 100% of your fucking heart and soul into fighting this enemy because you know how evil it is. That's what it really means, is that you do not know who and what we are truly up against. And that's all I have to say about it. And that concludes my lecture/presentation portion of this episode of What on Earth is Happening. Go back briefly to the slides. I just want to do a couple other quick housekeeping tasks.